Despite all of Toho's efforts, Godzilla Final Wars severely underperformed at the box office, causing them to announce that the series would be placed on hold for at least 10 years. Soon after, though, Yoshimitsu Banno, the writer and director of 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, acquired the rights from Toho and began shopping around his idea for a 3D Godzilla short film. Eventually, the idea grew into a feature-length film, and the rights to Godzilla found its way into the lap of Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures, who announced their intention to reboot Godzilla into the modern era while remaining faithful to the concept of the character. To accomplish this, they hired Gareth Edwards, an independent filmmaker who had made a splash with a genre film of his own, to direct. And so, just in time for his 60th anniversary, a second American-produced Godzilla film smashed its way into theaters, once again simply titled Godzilla, with the hope that it would breathe new life into the now 60-year-old franchise. On the day of his dad's birthday, young Ford Brody loses his mother to a power plant meltdown. 15 years later, Ford, now enlisted in the Navy, returns to his family only to be immediately torn away by the arrest of his father in Japan, who is convinced that the meltdown was no accident, but was instead the result of some unknown massive creature whose presence is being covered up by the government. Just in time, the long-dormant creature, dubbed Muto, hatches, as does its mate, sending the world into a tailspin of chaos and destruction. As mankind desperately tries and fails to subdue the beast, another giant creature, an ancient alpha predator named Godzilla, rises from the ocean to hunt them down. While Ford makes it his mission to get back to his family, Godzilla takes the fight to the Mutos, leaving humanity's survival in nature's hands. 16 years after the US's first attempt to introduce Godzilla to mainstream Western audiences, Godzilla 2014 feels like an apology, a film that goes out of its way to get Godzilla right in all the ways the former got it wrong. Structurally, it is very much a classic Showa-era Godzilla film, where a monster appears to threaten the Earth, and Godzilla arrives to stop it. However, devoid of the camp often associated with those films, and given a shiny new coat of paint only the American movie industry can afford, this formulaic and simple premise is given new life, injected with a sense of believability and realism that makes it immensely accessible for newcomers, while also being endearingly affectionate enough for older fans to appreciate.
Sammy. Mommy, look. Dinosaurs.
By far the most striking thing about Godzilla is the immense scale director Gareth Edwards brings to the picture. Perhaps more so than any other film of its kind, the monsters here feel truly enormous, with almost every shot framed in such a way that effectively conveys the imposing stature of beasts so large they don't even notice mankind's existence. This framework makes the film feel epic in a way few films are, spanning multiple countries and cities while also remaining focused on the human perspective on the ground. This is to say that the film is as intimate as it is epic, never indulging in destruction for its own sake, making for a more restrained action blockbuster, the kind that is increasingly rare to come by these days. Indeed, it may come as a surprise to some just how long it takes for the mayhem to get going. The mystery of the Mutos is an intriguing setup, and made all the more effective by having it anchored in the context of a family whom they've torn apart. Aaron Taylor Johnson is better than people give him credit for as Ford Brody, a soldier trained by past trauma to keep his emotions in check and do his duty even in the face of monstrous odds. Elizabeth Olsen plays his wife, Elle, an equally dutiful mother tasked with protecting her son amidst the turmoil. She isn't given much to do, but Olsen is naturally sympathetic in the role. The always reliable Ken Watanabe brings the invaluable Japanese perspective as Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, the one person who sees Godzilla as the solution instead of the problem. Sally Hawkins, David Strathairn, and Juliette Binoche round out the cast, but it is Bryan Cranston who captures your attention as Ford's father, Joe Brody, a man trapped in the past by grief. His performance is unsurprisingly magnetic, making the story immediately engaging.
Something killed my wife. And I have a right to know.
Once the monsters are unleashed, however, Godzilla gets going and never stops, relishing in the art of tension and suspense. Every set piece builds upon the last until it reaches a crescendo made up of the kind of classic kaiju conflict the franchise has been known for. The film's first proper introduction of Godzilla, a 10-minute long sequence in Hawaii, is a masterclass of escalation meant to maximize its impact. The film is full of these types of sequences, and all of them are different in significant ways, adding tons of variety to the action. Aided by special effects so good you don't notice them, incredible sound design that perfectly sells the size of the monsters, and a pounding soundtrack by composer Alexander Desplat, Godzilla becomes the kind of action movie you use to show off your entertainment system. For the first time in years, Godzilla is a hero in this film, albeit a apathetic one who pays no mind to the humans scurrying beneath his feet. This was a surprise to many at the time, but in hindsight, an appropriate choice. Despite his limited screen time, Godzilla oozes personality, a fact aided by a design that perfectly adapts him for the modern age, balancing a need for realism with faithfulness to the past. While kind of bland, the Mutos make for an interesting and oddly sympathetic antagonistic force. Unlike many of Godzilla's enemies, these creatures aren't treated as purposefully malevolent, but instead are treated as animals just doing what animals do. This further contributes to the film's intentions to treat the concept of Godzilla as realistically as possible, while still adhering to the fantasy inherent to it that makes it so appealing. Godzilla 2014 has some major blemishes, though, that keep it from being perfect. The film makes a huge mistake by killing off Bryan Cranston's character in the first act. Since his performance is arguably the emotional heart of the film, his absence is immediately felt, and abruptly disengages you from the narrative that up until that point had been so engaging. And while it is admirable that the film strives for restraint and the art of the slow build, it teases the audience one too many times for its own good. It eventually gets to the point of legitimate frustration, which will leave some a bit dissatisfied when it's all said and done. Even with these flaws, the 2014 Godzilla is a triumph as far as reboots and adaptations are concerned. As a Godzilla movie meant to appeal to mass audiences, it succeeds while also being a proper original blockbuster of its own. It adheres to the classic Godzilla formula while still doing its own thing, and does so in a way that properly sells the scope and scale a kaiju movie with a $100 million plus budget ought to have. It's a highly entertaining, surprisingly restrained, and extremely respectful adaptation that Godzilla fans can accept with open arms. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.